I'm Michael Weber, Artistic Director of Chicago's Porchlight Music Theater. Welcome to the Movie Musical Monday podcast. This series of recorded conversations explores all our favorite film musicals, from Broadway adaptations to Hollywood originals, as our rotating host and guest conversationalists open a discussion in which you are invited to participate. Today's movie musical is the 1962 film adaptation of the 1957 Best Musical Tony Award winner, The Music Man, starring Robert Preston, Pert Kelton, and the Buffalo Bills, with Paul Ford as Mayor Shin, Peggy Mondo as Ethel Toffelmeyer, Adnia Rice as Alma Hicks, Harry Hickox as Charlie Cowell, Susan Lucky as Zanita Shin, and Monique Vermont as Amaryllis, all of whom appeared either in the original Broadway production or the national tour. Today's host is Porchlight Executive Director Jeannie Lukow, with guest, veteran actor Mark David Kaplan, who has appeared in the Broadway national tour of The Lion King, off-Broadway in Forbidden Broadway, nationally at the Goodman Theater, Chicago Shakespeare, Porchlight Music Theater, and more. Let's go to the conversation.
Well, we're so thrilled that you joined us for the third Movie Musical Monday to talk about The Music Man. Mark, I guess I'm going to throw an initial question to you, and then, of course, if people want to comment, please do. Why do you love The Music Man? What makes it special for you?
Well, a little of my own personal history. For those of you who don't know me, I am a sometime actor in Chicago and other places. When we used to be able to do that on stage, I was doing it. But I sort of have a list of shows that have come to me 2 or 3 times in my life as an actor, and the last time as an assistant director. And Music Man was one of those. I started out in high school. I mean, how many of us can say we did it in high school?
And then what part did you play? Did you play Harold Hill?
I played Harold Hill.
Very nice.
Yes, Charmaine, I see you. A role that I'm not really right for, although it was fun to sing. My sister, who was a sophomore at the time, who many folks know, Rosalie Kaplan, played Winthrop. So it was a bit of a family affair. In Summerstock, then, at the Wagon Wheel Playhouse, where Michael Weber's worked, and so have a few others on this call, I believe. I was the bass in the quartet. Sally Murphy played, if those of you know Sally Murphy of Steppenwolf fame, and waiting to be in the Tracy Letts play on Broadway. She played Marion, the librarian. She was an opera major at Northwestern. So, then all of a sudden she became this series actress. And, at any rate. And then last year, I actually got to assist Mary Zimmerman on the production at the Goodman. So I feel like for that reason, and there's a short list of those shows that I've done 2 or 3 times that I feel like are, Little Shop's one of them. She Loves Me's one of them. These shows that at their very heart are about people at the heightened senses of what's going on in their lives. I mean, there's a great story to tell. There's an urgency to it. And as you might say, it's a little bit, although River City is a fictitious place in Iowa, it was certainly Meredith Willson's comment on what he thought might have been happening at the turn of the century in the Midwest. And I think there's stories that everybody feels like they can relate to. That's my short answer. I could keep going.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's such a universal story of, transformation, right? I always think like they call him the con man, but I feel like River City conned him, they totally won him over in an unexpected way, which is super fun. What makes this movie, or the play that it's so closely directed and based on, what makes it special for any of you guys? I see Joe has his hand up. Hey.
Hi, I'm Joe Eldridge. I teach English Lit at Columbia College in Chicago, but I'm an adjunct faculty, so that doesn't pay anything. So for the last 34 years, I've been a flight attendant. And the reason I'm telling you this is this play and musical is special to me because I have been very lucky in my life I actually met Barbara Cook and also Shirley Jones. I met Barbara Cook over 30 years ago. She sang at George's Supper Club here in Chicago. And my friend who invited me to go to the show did publicity for George's Supper Club. So after her performance, we were invited down to her dressing room and got to spend a little time with her talking. And then about 10 years ago, I had Shirley Jones on a flight from London back to Chicago. She was with her son, Patrick. They had been in London for some big gala to see David Cassidy, who was a huge, huge star in England. Was having some big gala performance. And on the way back, people were kind of sleeping and she was awake and wanted to chat. And I was more than happy to talk to her. And so those were two very special moments in my life. And I know it's crazy, but that's one of the big reasons why this musical is so special to me.
Of course. Well, I think we always like anything better when we know people in it, right? We go to the theater and we like it just that much more because we know somebody in it.
And Absolutely. If I might intercede, Patrick Cassidy, as you probably know, your aficionados, was in her stomach while she was while she was filming Music Man. So she talks about that a lot. And it's funny, on some sites, you see the cast of the Music Man and Patrick Cassidy's on there because he was there, which makes me laugh.
Absolutely. That's so great. Anybody else? Charmaine.
Well, I was in the high school orchestra when we performed this in Des Moines. So we felt close to it. And we even got extended from 2 nights to 3. It was so popular.
Wow.
Which is fun. But I just always, all through high school, up until I finally found my guy, related to My White Knight. And, and I really love that confluence of wants. She really gets hooked up with the wrong guy who turns out to be the right guy, so that's what I like about it.
Now, Chris Pasternak gave me a tidbit. He said that White Knight, because I'll make a confession straight up, and Mark, don't kill me. I have never seen the stage version of The Music Man. I have only seen this musical. And I made myself watch the Matthew Broderick thing last night. And
so did I make a face?
I couldn't get very far. I think I only got halfway through. It's just so not funny compared to this. This version is so much funnier and richer and more interesting. But its thing is the right word, says Chris. But in any case, thoughts on that?
You're also saying that My White Knight is replaced with Being in Love.
My White Knight didn't make it into the movie, or it was switched out with another song that kind of carried that plot line.
The B section of My White Knight is in there. She goes to All I Want Is a Plain Man, All I Want, which is the beautiful sort of story when she says what makes Shakespeare and Beethoven great. That's all still in there.
Yeah.
But the A section is what people have argued is a little bit too whimsical for Marion's character at that point in time. But there's more trivia, and I'm sure Chris gave it to you, so I'll let you.
Well, something, and maybe it's taboo because it wasn't in the notes, but certainly it's something I've heard several times is, the conspiracy theory, right? That Winthrop is really Marion's son, not her brother, and that it's Miser Madison who's the dad. Now, I'll just say right now, I do not hop on this train. Although I love a good conspiracy theory, I'm not down with this one for any number of reasons, but I'm not going to give you my reasons. I throw it out to you.
I don't think so. I thought you were going to say, because actually, folks, there's more trivia that they thought actually that My White Knight was ghost written by Frank Lesser, and that was a conspiracy theory for years.
Oh, that's an insider's conspiracy.
Yeah. And who knows whether that's really true. And honestly, it all seems very friendly. There was nothing contentious about it. But the reality was, and there's some sort of science behind it. If you go back to something in Most Happy Fella, there's some underscoring that's exactly My White Knight. I mean, it's very interesting sort of thing that somebody came up with. But the reality is, and I was trying to think back then, Barbara Cook, of course, too. I mean, we all know how amazing of a singer she was. And I wondered at some point, Being in Love isn't quite as challenging vocally, especially at the end. It's less challenging than My White Knight. And I'm not casting aspersions on Shirley Jones because I think she's gorgeous, but she was a studio voice at the time. You know,
She
did
was the
replace on
bankable
Broadway.
star. She was the bankable star in the movie.
Exactly.
I noticed Katrina, and I think Marcy had her name up her hand up as well. Katrina.
Hi there.
Hey.
Yeah, the Music Man has always been very special to me because my grandpa loved the Music Man, and he wasn't the kind of guy who was into theater. He loved the Cubs, and but he had a special place for the Music Man. So I remember watching it with him when I was little, and after he died, I found he had the soundtrack to it, and so I feel a very special connection to it. And I just love this scene that if you believe, things can happen. And that's just so powerful to me. So that's why it's so special to me.
Awesome.
That's lovely.
Hey, Marcy, how are you?
I'm well. I was actually waving at a friend, but I do have something to say. I'm an audience. I've always been in the audience. I've never really participated as actively as an actor or a singer or a musician. But I will say that when I was watching the movie last night, it seems to me Shirley Jones is gorgeous. And she does really well acting. And when she's doing a duet, she's fine. But when the scene is when it's her solo, it seems to me that the tension, she just doesn't hold the screen. As a singer, she doesn't hold the screen that well for me. I don't know. And yeah, she was a bankable star and they needed her. And she came to life when she was with Preston and with other people. And acting terrific. But singing, her solos, not so much. She just didn't do it for me.
Interesting.
And maybe that's why, too, she really was kind of I don't want to say like a second stringer, but she did a lot of studio recordings. She was in, what was it? She did Elmer. What did she do?
That was her big
Elmer Gantry.
sassy role,
right?
yeah.
But even on Broadway, she was in the chorus of something. You know what I mean? She started out, she and Jack Cassidy were in the chorus of something. Weber, you probably know. But like you said, there was something about being a presence that she maybe didn't have as much as others.
Right. I'm going to read David Fiorello, who's one of our very frequent music directors. He wrote in the comments, I love that in the same way that 76 trombones fits with Goodnight My Someone, which we'll explain if you don't know, and they mash it up later in the second act, but they intended My White Knight to mash up with The Sadder But Wiser Girl, such a great musical match. So for anyone who doesn't know, 76 trombones and Goodnight My Someone are the same melody or the same song, just slowed down. And so when they mash it up towards the end of the show, and then they reverse, he starts to sing the ballad. It's an awesome musical match. That is so true. David, did you want to expound on that a bit?
Friends? No, just that. I mean, it's a really, really interesting and beautiful way that I just think Meredith Willson planned out such a great show from the beginning. There's a guy who didn't write, 55 shows for the theater. But he put so much care and thought into this one. And I just love
like 8 years, right? Like a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, a long time.
And it didn't even make it into the show, and it's one of those things where I recently directed a production of it up in Milwaukee, and we experimented with that and got permission to use it. And it was just it completely enlightened the entire show. It was like, oh, there's another way in which they were kind of destined musically from the beginning to fit. And it's just a very clever, you can't use everything. There are great things. That's why great things get cut from shows. But you're like, yeah. That's
why so many things were cut and show up in something else. I mean, that the author does. Who wants to you're not going to waste that stuff.
You hear Barbara Cook actually talk about the show trying out. There's that great interview from, I want to say 25 years ago, where she talks about this show trying out, and I forget, it was Boston or wherever, but the audience was at their feet at the end. They actually were standing on the theater seats. They were so crazy about the show. And Morton DaCosta the next day said, that's great, you guys, but see, that's what I was afraid of. We still have work to do. They were still doing things like changing around the idea of how the show started without accompaniment with Rock Island, that just became a rhythm thing and the guys did it a cappella. They kept messing with that stuff, and they'd go away to something and then they'd come back to it. So in a sense, like you said, like David said, there's a lot of great stuff that happens and they want to give it a go and see if it's going to work. And ultimately the first thing worked more successfully.
Yeah. I'm going to read one of Robin's comments. She said, back to my conspiracy theory comment, I guess, the big age difference between Marion and Winthrop was always a little suspect for me, says Robin, but I think she's supposed to be like 20 and he's about 7 or 8. And I think there's probably like a 15-year age difference between brother and sister, but I don't know, they're Irish, right? Like it is no big whoop if she has this kid at like 45 or 40 and I think also when I watched the movie again, I was like, a lot of the parents are older in this movie. I don't know if they did that on purpose to make it seem better, but I just was like, wow, there's just a lot of old parents of like 10, 15-year-old kids. I mean, older,
It's a very big, in the big scenes, especially like in Iowa, was it trouble all of a sudden? River City is supposed to be a small population, but it ends up being a very big town, So I think as they started to fill it in, in big scenes, and then of course the scene in Act 2 at the social, it's sociable. Yeah, it's giant. And then you see the people who are playing teenagers who are really, great dancers, probably in their 20s, So it's very much a 60s musical in that way.
So earlier someone was saying, I think, I can't find her on the screen, Marcy maybe, saying that Shirley Jones wasn't really emotionally approachable. And Frankie Leo Bennett, one of our frequent actors, is on the call. And he says, Shirley Jones, the cinematography and lighting at times also removes a lot of the intimacy, a blessing and a curse. So maybe it was some of those effects too that kind of led to that. But I don't know, once they're on the footbridge and, the jig's up for her and all through in front of their home, I'm just buying everything she's selling, and I'm buying everything Harold's selling and his moments of transformation at the foot. Like, when he first hears the gossip, when he first gets there, when he first hears the gossip about her, when during Miss Marion, where he's kind of, he's assuming that she's kind of easy and she's like, what are you talking about? Right. And he goes through these things and he's still making the play until, after he realizes that she's been in the know all along. I just think that is totally fascinating.
I have a question for everybody, just because we're talking about, because I buy what she's selling as well, but at what point, and I think this is certainly in my business is arguable, however you want to play it. At what point do folks feel like he knows his jig is up? You know what I mean? And he's at the point where it has turned for him. I mean, there's a couple places in the story where I think that happens. I mean, there's a musical place that's very clear to me that obviously because it's a musical, that it's well supported. But does everybody understand what I'm saying? At what point do you feel like he kind of, like you said, he finally really does sincerely takes off the artifice of the Harold Hill con guy, and he realizes that.
Good question.
He's changed.
Peoples, when does that happen for you in this film?
One spot for me, I think, is, and it's very literate. It's the moment in the mashup, the 76 trombones, Good Night, My Someone. And he goes, there were horns of every shape. And then that goes away from him and he goes to her melody. Yep. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it because I love it.
True. Charmaine, is that what you were going to say, Charmaine?
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, he pulls out the paper, right? And that's
right.
The thing for him is like, shit, someone will love me just the way I am and I can go legit and build a life. But
yeah, it's actually an extraordinary moment. And it's the reason too. I mean, one of the questions I know you were saying, and I don't want to jump the gun, but why this movie holds up. And the reality, it holds up because they were smart enough, first step, to let Robert Preston do it on screen. And it was already, the show was closed, for 2 years before they did this film. Or they probably closed and then they started to do pre-pro and stuff. But he's so good and he plays things. I mean, it's certainly about a con man who's kind of an overt flim-flam guy. But the thing I love that he transfers to screen, like you think Buddy Hackett, it's going to be like a yuck fest, but their relationship is played really close to the vest. It's really good.
I love it. They're so good. Great.
Yeah. So I think they were smart to let him be, they
seemed like real friends right from the get-go. They're sitting there, how's it going? It's not easy, and it just feels like just two pals. It feels right. I noticed Mindy and had her hand up, and Lawrence. Take Mindy's thought first.
Hello. I'm going to be a little bit of a naysayer. It doesn't really hold up for me. I didn't see it, the play, But as a movie, I think it feels very stitched together. There were a lot of plot holes. I didn't really understand when all of a sudden Shirley Jones is now falling for Robert Preston. It seemed to happen off screen somewhere. The end, who taught the kids how to play the instruments. But in general, it's the kind of early 60s studio film that we had some really good production numbers, and it felt like it had some story stitching the production numbers in. So it didn't really work. The politics are a little difficult for me. You know, why should anyone trust you when you don't have a husband and they do? And I know it's the times, but I just, you know, I was throwing my remote at the TV a few times. But I did love the opening number, was fabulous. I love the gossipy women with the chickens. And who knew that Buddy Hackett was such a song and dance man? So that's my two cents.
He's great. Well, that's so interesting. There are definitely moments of that I've wrote down too. What did I write when I saw it? This movie runs the extremes of playing those close to the vest moments and then some real suspend your reality moments. Yeah. And I think, Minnie, that sort of speaks to where you are. And clearly, like, for example, too, when we did, when I assisted last year at the Goodman, of course, the first conversations in pre-pro were getting rid of the Watan Yi girls, as they well should have. I mean, right. And we can all argue that was a time back then. So not, and what, those of you folks know Heidi Kettering, who played the mayor's wife there, who was fantastic. They ended up doing something just as funny. I mean, it was like the way theater can continue to change and evolve. And, you know, of course, if we were writing this now, we would find the essence of what we wanted to say without saying some of that literal stuff that was done. So yeah, there are moments immediately too when I was watching, I was like, ooh, passing by this.
Right. Lawrence, did you have something to say?
Yeah, actually, I thought the Goodman production was much better in terms of showing exactly when Marion turns, which is when she sees Winthrop just explode with joy in the Wells Fargo song. And it's like anybody who can transform him, she's on his side. And that's when she pulls the paper out of the Indiana Journal and becomes on his side. So I thought that was well supported, at least in the play and the way it was emphasized in the direction at the Goodman. I don't know that it's quite as clear in the movie, but I think it's well supported. In terms of the politics, I agree. It's surprising when you look at the Marion the Librarian song, and she clearly wants to have nothing to do with him and is kind of frightened with him, and he keeps on pursuing her. It just plays a lot differently now than it did in 59.
Yeah.
And then also just the mother with, this man accosted me on the street and said, so what did you say to him?
Right.
So yeah, it's just different than.
And then she goes back to him. I was talking about that stranger.
Yeah, right. She's not going to let an opportunity pass by. That's for sure.
And then even with the anvil salesman, she puts the record on the gramophone to try and create a mood.
Yeah, but then if it gets too pushy, then the gramophone stops. That's for sure. And Tony Gibson, our board chair, brought up Anna White's choreography. So. Tidbit on her, she was born in Nova Scotia, and my dad was born in Nova Scotia, which is the only reason I recall that tidbit. So there you go. I don't really know a lot of her stuff. Tony, do you want to give us a little mini recap of why she's amazing?
You know, she's one of those choreographers that I really didn't know everything that she did until I started researching her more, and the amount of work that she did, and to not really know her name is astonishing to me. Her theater credits alone included, she was a performer in a bunch of things, which is how she became, how Michael Kidd became her mentor, which I also think is kind of cool how there's a lot of moments in Shapoobie that are so like Seven Brides, which is really funny to me because there's a lot of techniques that are the same. But anyway, I mean, some of the other musical movies and things that she did were amazing, including Mame in 1776 and Gigi and all kinds of other stuff. I just was surprised to learn all that.
Yeah.
And Marion the Librarian is a fantastic number. If you look at how it starts and the way she makes theatrical and beat to beat sense of it, it's really terrific. And I was looking at obviously there was a lot of different angles, but she made what was seemingly a kind of a small space. She made a lot happen. I mean, it was very vertical with the,
right. I love when they go up the stairs on the outside of the stairs. One of my favorite bits in that scene is when she shoves him down on the bench and he like laughs a chortle that is just like so real to me. It's just so cute. Like he's laughing and I don't know. It's just,
it's
you
great.
watch it enough times, those little bits.
And how great is he as a dancer? Come on.
Yeah, right?
They talked about, he had, before Music Man, he really was not a musical actor, but I've watched a lot of interviews where they talked about the different people who were possibly going to, be considered for the movie version. And one of them was Ray, maybe even initially was Ray Bolger, but they decided that he didn't have really the right kind of chemistry, the mix. He was kind of goofy showbiz guy, and which was great, but Robert Preston kind of came at it from a different angle.
Right. Like Danny Kaye, you could have seen maybe would work a la a Robert Preston, but Robert Preston is so much better. Most of the other people on that list just seemed like, what?
Right.
But Henry Marks just wrote in the comments that Van Johnson was Harold Hill in London. And of course, Dick Van Dyke did like a 1980 Broadway version. And we hear that Hugh Jackman's going to be coming up in this. Right. So, which kind of leads into one of our questions, like, how would you cast this today? So let's just do a combination of who's your favorite Harold Hill and who would you like to play Harold Hill or Marion or any of the characters? Rosie, did I see your hand up?
My hand was not up, but I would just like to say that I actually do like the Hallmark version with Matthew Broderick and Kristen Chenoweth. And it was, I actually stole the DVD of it from Netflix when they actually mailed you the DVDs because I liked watching it so much. And I think that like the ladies that are cast as the mayor's wife's friends in that one are really, really fun.
Yeah. Charmaine, your thoughts?
I was just going to say, after Hugh Jackman played Barnum, I didn't know that much about him up till then, but after seeing that, I would love to see him do this. I will crawl to New York to see him.
I saw him play Peter Allen in Boy from Oz, but that's already a long time ago. And he has the goods, he does. He's terrific. He's full of talent. And from what I understand, too, for everybody who I know who has at least worked with him or peripherally, he's a gem to work with. So, sounds like a good person to be leading a large company of a show,
For sure. Hugh, Spencer, you had your hand up, sir.
One of the problems is that you have people who are too recognizable in roles. Preston was not. And that's one of the successes of this. I mean, if you look at Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, you say, oh, there's Liz Taylor and Richard Burton. And I think that's the one thing of casting unknowns would be a really good idea. Maybe not bankable, but casting unknowns.
Right. Instead of moving forward, instead of Hugh Jackman, I don't know if Sutton Foster has this. I mean, to us, she does, but I don't know if she's got the same recognition across the board. But yeah, other thoughts on casting?
I agree with that. I think there are a lot of people out there who deserve a go. So good for you for saying that.
Yeah. Robin?
For some reason, I'm on this age thing tonight, but I kind of want Harold and Marion to be closer in age because I feel like if Harold is too much older than her, it's a little creepy.
How old is too old? I feel like they're like 15 years apart in the movie. Like she's supposed to be like 25 and he's supposed to be like 40, give or take.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of pushing it. Like I don't want it to seem like he's like the creepy uncle or whatever.
Right.
So,
she already had one of those. No, just kidding.
Oh yeah, Mr.
So Chris, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I had two Broadway people I would love to see in this. The Harold Hill is maybe a bit of an unconventional choice, but Norbert Leo Butz.
Yeah.
I've seen him do two very somewhat similar things, both in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels and Big Fish, especially. And he's able to, which is like, is just have a big heart at the center of everything that he does, which I think is one of the things about Robert Preston that works so well. And then Laura Benanti, I would pay any amount of money to hear her sing that score. And I think the two of them would be fun and a spunkier or a spunky pair to play off of.
She
and of course, I would love to.
She has a viewpoint, which would be really interesting. Yeah.
And I would have loved to have seen the Kennedy Center production with Norm Lewis and Jessie Mueller. That's cheating. We all love her. I wonder how he was. He wouldn't be the first person that would come to mind, but I would certainly have loved to have seen that production.
David Fiorello.
I would love to see Anika Noni Rose do Marion, and I think it would be. Thank you, Charlotte. Very good. She agrees. Yeah, she was in the Dreamgirls film, Princess and the Frog. She was in Carolina Change, but I think her voice can go for years and years, but I think she would be beautiful. I would love that. Love to see her.
Jerry says in the comments, he questions, was Warner Brothers in financial trouble in the early 60s so that bankability became so important? Bankability, of course, was also the reason that Audrey Hepburn got the role in My Fair Lady over Julie Andrews. I don't know. I think all studios want a certain level of bankability. And I think, that they seemed like they didn't want to take Robert Preston on the ride. So,
right.
Yeah, Jeannie, I was just going to add to what you said, especially then. And there were still, I think there were still contract players in 62, but it's definitely bankability, and it's probably still the same today. So I just got a sick feeling that we're going to see Zac Efron and Selena Gomez in the in the Disney Does Music Man. But to be politically correct, they'll call it Music People or something like that. So,
right.
But yeah, I think they always want names of people that are going to sell their movie.
Yeah. Joe?
If you look at I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you look at the beginning, I was watching how the movie introduces people. I was looking at the differences between the screen version and the script. And that also speaks to Mindy's earlier comment. I think the script in the stage version makes better chronological sense, but they mixed some things around for weird reasons, for odd locale reasons, and it didn't hold up. But I was looking at star entrances. Buddy Hackett has a star entrance. He comes from behind the horse,
Right.
I think there were a lot of stars in it. Do you know what I mean? Like, or at least people at the time who were, and I wonder, and again, it goes back to what Mr. Hugh Spencer said. It said, why not let the story be the star? I mean, and like you said, Robert Preston wasn't a giant film person at the time yet, was he at all? I mean, he was, I don't know.
No, they wanted to cast a ton of people, like Frank Sinatra is one.
Oh, that's right.
Several people.
Andy Griffith, maybe, I think they were talking about. It was like,
maybe.
He was somewhere.
Joe, did you still have a comment? Cary Grant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Joe?
Well, Shirley Jones was an Oscar-winning actress at the time, and she got the roles that Barbara Cook did on Broadway. And so, there you have it. But, I'm thinking when I watched this again, I thought, today, this play really lends itself to somebody who's really good at rapping. And because there's so much talking and speaking, and it's very, very musical. And I thought, why not have Will Smith come back and, do something? This would be a great way for him to get back into music. He's got that personality, something crazy like that. But, the other thing I think about this musical today is a song like Shapoopy, which is so much fun. It's such a #MeToo song. It's just sexism at its best. Or worst.
Right. Yeah. I don't know, your comment for some reason made me remember that when upon my most recent watching, when Wells Fargo Wagon starts, I'm just like, wow, this is what we feel like Amazon delivery today, right? The Amazon delivery man pulls up and you're like, what box do they have for me? I got a bathtub, I got a chainsaw, it's so funny. Mindy, did you have something to say?
Oh, just real quick, I want to do a shout out to those Buffalo Bills. And I was wondering, since a lot of you are singers, did you like Robert Preston's advice that singing is just enhanced talking? I would disagree as someone who can't sing, but I was wondering if those you sing, is that what it is, enhanced talking?
It's funny that they call them the Buffalo Bills, and they don't get like individual name credit at the end. Isn't that crazy? And they all were from Broadway. And the Buffalo Bills were a group that started. I think they had gone through two or three different baritones until they landed on that particular group. So they were an entity on their own, but it was just weird that they didn't get their names.
They didn't. They were fantastic.
They were so good. And I agree with you, Minnie. I don't. It's not just sustained talking.
Otherwise, we'd all be doing it.
Right.
Yeah. You?
Well, Preston says the reason he got the role was that the audition was Trouble, and everybody else had a problem doing Trouble, except he, as an actor, not a singer, had no particular problem, and that's how he got the role.
Interesting.
Neat. That's really neat.
And by the way, I also think that Norbert Leo Butz is my favorite too.
Yeah, he's good.
I like the Will Smith idea too, Joe. He's charming. He's talented. It'd be interesting to see if, something like that. And maybe at a certain point, I agree with the folks who said that they should be more in sync age-wise. I think that would be interesting, that they're both at a place where they're at the end of a tether of sorts, because that also would feed into the fact that he's been doing this for a while, and the whole relationship with seeing Marcellus and going, oh my God, Greg, you're still doing this,
right.
And when he finally does meet her, yeah, it is weird that she's supposed to be as young as she is. I don't like that. I don't think I like that. I like that part of the dramaturgy at all.
Why couldn't Winthrop be a little older? Why does he have to be so young? I don't know. Lawrence?
Yeah, just from the play, from the wording, it makes it seem like he's supposed to be a lot younger, because this is supposed to be 1912. And he said he graduated from the conservatory in '05. So he graduated 7 years before. And then at the footbridge, he says, and again, this is one of those lines I really don't like. He says to Marion, you're 26 years too late. So she's supposed to be about 26.
Right.
And he's supposed to be like 5 years or 7 years out of school. So
right.
We take that line out for the redo. Let's take that line out.
Yeah. Yeah. So Michael messaged me that Winthrop is 6, but isn't he older than 6? Is he really only 6? Supposed to be 6? Because he seems awfully young for 6. 6 seems awfully young. He's small, but I don't know.
I feel like he's never, at least on stage in the versions I've ever seen, maybe, and it's just a castability thing, I've never seen him played quite that young.
Right.
Yeah, Ron Howard was about, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Mindy.
I was going to say Ron Howard was about 7 or 8 when he did that role.
Yeah. So I don't know if he's supposed to be older or younger, but Henry Marks mentioned, how would gender reversal work? Meaning it would be an all-girls band and she would do the seducing. Is that what you mean, Henry? Femme fatale.
I like
and a male librarian. Mark? I
like it. I think there's I would even go a little bit further, and let's just not even mess with the genders everywhere. Just look at them, and who knows, maybe it's musically it says something different, but maybe the quartet is mixed up, and let's see if we just throw all of that to the wind, gender wise, and if we're going to do it, let's really do it,
Right. This is such a beloved musical and movie, and nobody's really mixed it up too much. In the Matthew Broderick version, there were Black people walking around on like this, where you saw nary a person of any color, but nobody's really pushed it very far.
The time period, sadly, was a conscious choice. And
it's Iowa. There's just not.
I get it, and I get it, and shame on them all at the same time. So.
Right. It doesn't feel as weird in this movie than it did in Grease last week. When we watched Grease and talked about it last week, and this like 50s nostalgia, I'm like, the 50s sucked for a lot of people in this country. So, but this somehow, I don't know, maybe because it's so long ago and it's not LA, it's just the middle of Iowa. It doesn't quite feel that bad.
Right.
And better than Grease, I think this did a better job of, I felt that it was 1912. Grease and Hair the week before, I felt as if they were play acting in the time, but I thought they did a better job with the sets and the costumes on this one to give it more of a period feel.
The fronts of the women's hair still looks a little contemporary for me. But I compare that to the time period. It's like the movie of Camelot. I mean, when you look at Vanessa Redgrave, she has the most beautiful 60s makeup on. It's like, Guinevere didn't look like that, folks. So it's a product of the time in which it was made. So, but I agree with you, Minnie. I think the costumes are extraordinary. I love the color palette at the sociable when everybody has a bit of pink and red. It's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous.
And her green cummerbundy thing. I love that. Frankie, Leo Bennett, did you have a thought?
I did, but I'm having a technical difficulty, so I'll come back.
Okay, come back to us. I'll get it. I love the hats too. The hats, the costumes, they're great. Of course, there's not, as somebody pointed out in the notes of this, that there's not a lot of farmers for Iowa. Like everybody's really dolled up. You can find them. And of course, it's the 4th of July celebration. It's the sociable. It's the, there's reasons to be dressed up, but yeah, not a lot of that's pretty well off community, River City, which is based on is it Mason City? That was his real hometown in the real city in Iowa. It's supposed to be his love letter to Iowa. But of course they kind of seem like rubes a bit and rude and kind of mean. I mean, they're a bunch of things, right? They're a bit contrarian, but in the end, don't you just love everybody? And I'd move to River City.
Flawed and all.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Rosie, did you have your hand raised?
I was just going to say the same thing that Jeannie said, that it is surprising that this small town in Iowa seems to be filled with mostly affluent people. Mm-hmm. But I don't mind it because it's a musical and I'd rather see them all dressed in opulence than, farmers.
Right. It's clearly meant when they're all dressed in pink for the sociable. I mean, it's clearly, this was meant to really be like the stage version. Joe?
I was thinking at the opening of this film when I'm watching it, and on the train with all of those traveling salesmen there in that car, I thought, oh, yeah, something could happen here. If we were doing a production today, because, you've got to open it up a little more and forget about all of these restrictive ideas that are being placed on this from the time period. I remember seeing Whoopi Goldberg once talk about auditioning for the play St. Joan. Mm-hmm. And she said that, when she was doing the audition, they said, excuse me, but you realize you're Black. And she said, it's a play. It's a play. It's not real. It's a play. So, why can't we do some of these things in productions?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm back, thankfully. I'm back. It speaks to the casting and in general, this ideology of how the film has so many things that are making us feel cringeworthy. And I still feel that moments of it were probably cringeworthy when they were on stage. And I feel like that was a point that Meredith Wilson was trying to take. I turned into Winthrop for a second. And it's speaking to whatever casting we wanted and anybody can doing it, is that I also feel like the film and how it was shot was trying to say the only way we can really do this is that it has to lose some level of realism, is that it is a small town fairy tale the whole time, is that you just get rid of any notion of this can't happen or anything like that, is that the audience knows what the end of this was, especially by the time the film had come out. And so it's a matter of watching the unraveling and not necessarily watching the like beat by beat, like, oh, this is how people actually acted. It was like, nope, this is about the faction of society and how Harold breaks them down until it's just the two of them.
Absolutely.
And it's filmed like that, actually. I mean, the way it sort of whittles itself down to that.
Yeah.
You know, even in terms of the number of people in the scenes. I was going to say that I do love some of the lines that are in the movie that aren't in the stage version. Like when he passes by that one, all those character types, he says to that one guy, can you send me the direction of a nice hotel? The Palmer House in Chicago.
Yeah, right.
You know, I mean, I loved they all were rhythmed and beated well, and you immediately got an idea of the Iowa stubborn that he was about to encounter. And I think it was a smart way to do a smaller spectrum, you know, as opposed to a guy walking on a giant stage, you know.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Right. Lawrence?
Yeah, I have a question. And on stage play, is Amaryllis watching the sadder but wiser girl? For me,
Nope.
I was shocked.
Very good. I think the same thing, Lawrence. Absolutely. And she's giggling and they're doing it again. And in story-wise, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that this little girl doesn't go and, I don't know, not that she's
I
going to.
don't think she knows what it is. Like what,
She doesn't know what it is.
Really, some of it kind of goes over the head, right?
Right, but it's like, this is all fun.
Right.
When what they're talking about really isn't fun for a little girl.
Yeah.
No.
That's so observant. Yeah. That's bizarre to me. And she's giggling. Yeah, she's giggling as if she doesn't hear a word. It's gentlemen doing funny stuff and dancing together, you know.
Right.
Kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
What do you think was behind the choice of Ron Howard spitting when he was supposed to be lisping? Do you think maybe he just didn't know how to do a lisp? I found it an odd choice.
I think it was just the ultimate comic effect, you know, that this little kid could produce. That's how I took it. But
because isn't there a moment when Robert Preston wipes his face?
Yeah, I think so.
I thought that was gilding a little bit there.
Right. And I read somewhere that he was supposed to have more of a speech impediment, more like a stutter than just a lisp. But I don't remember if that was in like the early text or the play version or, you know, the stage version or what. In the play, I think, he's supposed to be a little more than just a lisper.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a whole other avenue, you know, especially if it were written now, a whole other thing to think about in terms of, I mean, he's a thoughtful, interesting kid who is not like other kids. I mean, and that's what we talked about a lot even last year, that he just was an interesting, you know, kid who didn't respond to people in the same way. And obviously story-wise, because, you know, the way his feelings of losing his dad and there's a lot of real stuff embedded in there. But it is interesting. I wonder too, and that's a question, we don't have to dwell on that, but would he be written with that speech impediment now? Had this been written?
Mm-hmm. Well, he's got to overcome something, right? That Harold can help him overcome so that Marianne can fall in love with Harold. Whatever it may be.
Sure.
Yeah. But he doesn't know the territory. Wilson's book on the creation of the Music Man says Charmaine. Charmaine, have you read that book?
Yeah, it's been quite a while. In fact, I was trying to think of, there's something about the lisp with Winthrop came up later in the development of the thing. But there's a lot of interesting bits about, and I think Hugh was reading in Wikipedia, there were like 20 more songs that were in the piece that didn't get in.
Yep.
That he just really worked this thing.
He really did. Yeah.
That's amazing.
But he doesn't know the territory. Hugh, you have something else?
Well, there ought to be a lisp or something. Otherwise, why would you have a character named Amaryllis?
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And she's so, you know, it's like she makes him do it and she laughs, but then she's so surprised that he cries. Like, why did he take it so bad?
Right.
You know, which is so sweet when she's really just in love with him. She sings, you know, Good Night to the Star or whatever the heck it was. It's so cute, right?
Yeah.
And interestingly, while Wilson, I think Meredith Wilson wrote at least one memoir, maybe, but Robert Preston didn't write any. He was a very, very private guy in Hollywood, which is interesting.
That is interesting. Michael Weber and I were discussing earlier today. Morton DaCosta, he only did 3 films, and the next one was Island of Love, right, with Robert Preston and Tony Randall and Walter Matthau. So it's interesting. It's just interesting, and I'm looking at all of that. I mean, looked at Shirley Jones was involved in a project with him later on. It's kind of like it is now. If you have somebody you really like to work with, it seems that you want to stay together.
Yeah, Charmaine says, There I Stood with My Piccolo was Wilson's book about his earlier days because he actually played in John Philip Sousa's band. Yeah, he brought, so much of his own life and story. And I guess he had a much older sister too. He brought a lot of his life to this work for sure.
Although I have to say, I was a little embarrassed when I heard the song Till There Was You, because I've always known that as a Beatles song. And I said, oh, this came first. So
he made more money off the Beatles song than he made off the movie and stage rights combined or whatever it was.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Mindy, I love that you said that. I love that. I love that you're here. It's the same thing as Send in the Clowns, being a major hit for Sondheim, because of Sinatra and Streisand, it's just, I love it.
I love that they loved it so much, and they played it on Ed Sullivan, I think, too. One of the first things they played. So that's a good way to ingratiate yourself with the Americans, I think.
It's really they sing it beautifully. It's so
they do.
It's really the simplicity of the lyrics, and it's a gorgeous melody. It's really lovely.
Da, da, da. Yep, it's lovely.
So good.
Sure. Joe, did you have a comment?
Oh, no, I'm just rubbing my forehead.
It's been a long hour of conversation for you.
No, I just don't have air in my apartment. Until tomorrow is when they turn it on.
Oh, good. Well,
same here. It's about 400 degrees in my place.
Your fan is fantastic.
Well, thank you.
We're a fan of your fan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, we're coming close to the end of our program. Any other comments, parting thought? Anyone from the cheap seats that we haven't heard from yet? Okay. Robin makes a good final point that this was the end of the period when Broadway show tunes could be crossover hits in pop music. Oh. Michael, I know that you played Harold Hill in one of your early performances. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that in the final 3 minutes?
Oh, no, that was just high school. But it's the thing that got me really interested in musicals was playing Harold Hill in high school. So I think a lot of people came to musicals by The Music Man. It was a show that was done in a lot of high schools. And that Beatles thing, it's the only non-Beatles song they ever sang. They never sang another song that wasn't written by themselves.
Really?
Interesting that Meredith Willson would have been the one who did that. So as we get ready to wrap up, thanks everybody for joining us for The Music Man. Thank you, Jeannie, and thank you, Mark Kaplan, for being our special guest. We hope you enjoyed this Movie Musical Monday podcast and that you'll join us live to participate in our next discussion. You'll find information about upcoming events on our website and how you can join in the conversation. Theaters across the country need your support now, more than ever. We hope you'll consider a donation to Porchlight Music Theater today. Just go to porchlightmusictheater.org. Until next time on Movie Musical Mondays, I'm Michael Weber.